Transport Infrastructure Committee meeting 8:09. Welcome to all councillors on the committee and visiting councillors, Councillor Gates, Deputy Mayor, Councillor O'Neill and Councillor McDonald. We've got no leave of absence at all. Item 3 is confirmation of minutes. If I could have a confirmation of the minutes. That's Councillor Caldwell, seconded by Councillor PC Young. All those in favour? That's carried. You right there with that, Sandy? All good? All right. Councillor Peter Young's just running a couple of minutes late, but he'll join us shortly. The committee, we have 6 starred items there today. Did anyone want to unstar anything?
Good morning, Madam Chair. Just hoping that we could deal with the conflicts of interest declaration item, if that's all right.
Okay.
Madam Chair, I haven't taken the step of forwarding, I suppose, notice to the City Solicitor through the Council Conflicts email address because in my firm view, I do not have a declarable conflict of interest to make, declaration to make, but I did want to bring the meeting's attention to the fact that my wife and I own an investment property. It's a small unit in Palm Beach, in and around, I think, the 19th Ave area. I didn't form the view that I had a declarable conflict of interest or a prescribed conflict of interest because of the very general nature of the report, and that the suggested or foreshadowed infrastructure improvements service a significant number of people in the local government area. In fact, it deals with Palm Beach and all roads that might lead to Palm Beach. I thought I'd bring that to the meeting's attention in case any councillor was so moved to move a procedural motion compelling me to manage that.
Any questions at all, councillors? All right, so I don't believe there's a conflict there, and we do have the City Solicitor on the line. Did you want to ask for Cherie's advice, or?
Yeah, thank you very much, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, through you to the City Solicitor, would it be fair to say that I've landed on a correct position here, that when Council deals with a matter that affects a significant number of people in the local government area, for example, an entire suburb, that there's not a declarable conflict of interest declaration that's required?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, I agree with that position.
All right.
I've actually looked at this issue in the context of the Gold Coast Light Rail previously in your investment property, and I'm confident you don't have a declarable conflict of interest.
Thank you very much, City Solicitor, and thank you, Madam Chair, for that.
Thanks, Councillor Vorster. Councillors, we have 6 starred items today. Did we want anything else? Councillor Vorster.
6.3. Thank you, Madam Chair.
6.3 unstarred. Any others, councillors, at all? If I could have a mover for the remaining starred items, that would be right. Councillor Caldwell, seconded Councillor Patterson. All those in favour? That's carried. You right with that, Sandy? Yep, all right. So I'll go to item 6.3, the petition regarding the review of local law policy there, and I'll go to you, Councillor Vorster.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just had a question for City officers, and before asking that question, I'd just like to thank Director Twine for having taken up this issue. The original petition, I think, has languished for a little while, but it's now been brought to this committee to be dealt with. Madam Chair, my question through you to the Director, and perhaps it's something that can be taken on notice between now and full council, is that the petitioner seeks to legitimise the use of low-impact recreational equipment, for example, basketball hoops at the end of cul-de-sacs, and City officers have, I think, arrived at a sensible position that that would be incompatible with superordinate state legislation. But the petition also asks for council to allow letterboxes constructed within the road reserve to remain in situ until such time as that letterbox arrives at its end of life and will need to be reconstructed. So, for example, if a letterbox has been in the nature strip for the last 30 years, that council wouldn't proactively ask for that letterbox to be relocated until such time as that letterbox needs to be replaced. City officers in their argument or in their position have relied on, I suppose, inconvenience and Australia Post requirements to justify their position, which is fair enough. But what I'd like to know is, do the same laws that prohibit the use of basketball hoops in the road reserve apply to letterboxes as well? Because that wasn't clear in the report. Are we merely responding to Australia Post, or is the superordinate state legislation applicable too?
Through you, Madam Chair, thank you for the question, Councillor Voss. So we will take that one on notice. I believe it is, but I want to make sure before I get back to you, so I'll double check on that.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Councillors, any other questions on item 6.3? No? If I could have a mover. Sorry, Councillor Young, yep.
I'm reasonably happy with the officer's recommendation, but I'm also comfortable with kids playing basketball in the local street. And I wonder if we can temper this by noting that we're not actually enforcing a restriction here, but just providing a response in regard to a petition, and that our position is not necessarily against kids recreating in the street. So on that basis, I would move that number 1 is as is, number 2, that would be changed so that despite council's consideration of the benefits of children recreating in the street, the placement of the petitioners be advised, blah, blah, blah. Let the children play. Yes. I just don't want it taken that we are stopping these children, and I don't want anyone in that local... the Visual Council may have better insight to this. And what about cricket? Exactly, recreation.
Right, I'll go to Councillor Voss and then I'll go to Councillor Owen-Jones.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Look, there was a time where the state government proposed to abolish the cul-de-sac. I'm not sure if many of you recall that, and we took a very firm line that we wanted to preserve, I suppose, the opportunity for those living in a cul-de-sac to enjoy green time instead of screen time, right? So playing basketball, cricket, handball and all of that. I mean, I live in a cul-de-sac, it's great. The reality is, though, sometimes neighbourhood disputes can lead to enforcement action, and then we end up in a very difficult position because we're under, and it's kind of described in the report here, there's a requirement on us to ensure that the rules are enforced so that risks that are known to us are properly managed so that we're not ourselves exposed to issues of liability. My feedback through you to Councillor Young is that if we were to change the city officer recommendation now, what we should merely do is refer to the fact that council will manage reports on a complaint basis, right? And that would maybe give comfort to people who may worry that we're going to be driving around cul-de-sacs reporting incidents, that that's not the case. We're reaffirming the fact that we will only respond to complaint when managing the use of low-impact recreational facilities in our streets. I think if we do anything more than that, if we do anything to, in word, legitimise the behaviour, we're going to expose ourselves to risk if somebody is injured in the roadway because we're giving it tacit endorsement. So that's the only feedback I'd provide to Councillor Young. I think let's acknowledge the fact that we respond to complaint, that there is no proactive program, but let's not legitimise it because it is contrary to superordinate state legislation.
Councillor Owen-Jones.
Do we still have Cherie with us?
Pardon?
Do we still have the City Solicitor with us? So I'd be interested in Cherie's view on whether or not the City should be acknowledging how comfortable we are or not with kids playing on a road reserve.
Through you, Mr Chair, and I apologise, I'm echoing about this, you probably. I do have concerns about council endorsing children playing on the road from a liability perspective. I think it's better to certainly safer to proceed with the recommendation as drafted by officers.
So I don't know whether or not it's been seconded, but I'm happy to foreshadow moving the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm happy to support Councillor Owen-Jones's foreshadowed recommendation when and if we arrive at that point. Just noting, however, I am interested in that further advice from Australia Post. Yeah.
Councillor Young, did you, for want of a seconder, for...
Speak to it.
Yes.
Thanks,
please.
Chair. I can for a minute. My understanding is I can speak for a minute without a seconder.
Go ahead, Councillor
Thanks.
Young.
I just felt that the officer's recommendation, if that was to be endorsed, could be used by people to very specifically stop children from playing on the sidewalk, in the streets, as they have for decades. And I don't think that that's our intention here. Our intention is to, of course, recognise the law and say the law says you shouldn't obstruct and you shouldn't do this and you shouldn't do that. But at the same time, just couched in these terms, it just says, well, we think there's a recognisable benefit in kids playing outdoors, but these rules overwhelm that. Mm-hmm. So
outdoors is different in the streets. So
I
would have supported that.
Playing in the streets may be problematic.
Yes. Right, so Councillor Peter Young's put that to us for want of a seconder. So did anyone want to second what Councillor Peter Young's put forward? Other than that, we'll go back to the nope, no seconder there. So we'll go back to the foreshadowed motion and I'll go to Councillor Owen-Jones to speak to it.
Thank you. So I appreciate where Councillor Peter Young's coming from, and I don't think any of us are wanting to discourage young people from playing safely outdoors, but I think the emphasis has to be on the word of safety. I think it's beholden on the city to not to be reactive rather than proactive in terms of enforcement in this area, but we've got many cul-de-sacs in Helensvale, and some of them have car parking in the middle of them where there's movement of traffic in all sorts of directions. So, and not always the young people in the streets being supervised. So, I think that there's a balance that we have to strike, and to me it makes sense that if the state has legislation that we can't work around, it is what it is. In regards to the letterboxes, my experience with them is that generally it arrives via neighbourhood complaints, and then once one person gets pinged for a letterbox being slightly outside of their boundary, they then drive around and find all of the other letterboxes in the suburb that are also out of the driveway. So it becomes a bit of pulling the string, and it just keeps on unravelling. So I think that we need to be careful about what type of enforcement notices we issue in regards to letterboxes as well, and we just need to have a fair amount of common sense in regards to that. So if it is impeding the delivery of Australia Post and parcels, that clearly makes sense. If it stops pedestrians from moving freely on footpaths, that makes sense. But I think, again, it's an area where we need to be reactive rather than proactive.
Thanks, Councillor Owen-Jones, and I'll go back to Councillor Vorster.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And if I could just add, I think when we envisage the playing of basketball, for example, that infrastructure can take a number of forms, and there's certainly portable basketball hoops that can be placed on a driveway, for example, within a private property boundary. So I would just urge anyone hoping to eke out as much recreational space on their private property as possible to have a think about that movable infrastructure that can be located on a driveway, which is also a hard surface, rather than encroaching in the public road reserve with a permanent piece of infrastructure. I think that there are other options, and I think what bringing that infrastructure into the road reserve on a permanent basis does is unfortunately make your lightning rod for complaint. And I say that generally because there are many cases, I'm sure, of us all as local representatives receiving, emails or phone calls about those sorts of hoops. I am most interested in 2B, not 2B, no, 2B, being the letterboxes, because it is sometimes a very costly exercise to demolish a letterbox constructed out of bricks, as they were back in the day, with footings, very costly. And if a letterbox has not been the source of nuisance or complaint over the course of 30 years, I firmly believe we need to take a common sense approach when addressing that first complaint, because we don't know the personal circumstances of that homeowner. They may be a pensioner, they may be somebody who's recently unemployed, for example, and to put that financial impost on them for something that can be rightfully dealt with at the end of life of that asset, I think's unfortunate, and we really shouldn't be doing it. So if between now and full council we can find a way of accommodating that end of life approach, I'd be very interested. And I think that might be a very similar approach to the one that city officers take when residents put in those kind of rubberised, I can't call them curb adapters because that's the end of the stormwater channel, but those like driveway kind of aprons that sit in the curb. There are many of those across the city, not all legitimate and approved, and experience tells me that they're usually allowed to remain until such time as the road or curb is renewed at end of life. And if it's okay to do it for that class of asset, I think we can and should be taking a similar approach to letterboxes. Thanks.
Councillor Gates.
Thanks, Chairman. I'm not on this committee, but I just want to endorse the committees moving forward with the officer's recommendation. Our little people are so very important and precious, and they don't think of the consequences of chasing a ball very quickly out onto a road. In what had been suggested, we don't and can't identify between a cul-de-sac, a crescent, a street. It would just be, in my mind, so very, very foolish not to protect our little people as greatly as we possibly can and not put any sort of risk at all in their way. So I'm so supportive of the action and recommendation that's been taken.
Thanks, Councillor Gates. So if there's no other comment or input there, we'll take that to the vote. Are you happy to move that, Councillor Owen-Jones? Moved by Councillor Owen-Jones, seconded by Councillor Vorster. All those in favour? That's carried. Thank you. That's item 6.3. You right with that, Sandy? All right, councillors, and then our final item 6.6, which is the Gold Coast Light Rail Stage 4 update and Palm Beach Local Area Transport Study. So there's also, I think there's a bit of a presentation there with Mr Tilley, so...
Well, Madam Chair, I was going to put to you, we hadn't attached one, but in view of our discussion last week when I briefed you on this, we did prepare one if councillors would like a presentation. So I'll ask you, otherwise we can talk to the report.
Happy? Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
All right, so if that's all right, we'll have the presentation. Thanks, Matt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, committee. Hopefully it's a fairly succinct presentation. We'll fly over and, as always, very welcome to take some questions on the go or towards the end if need be. So we spoke to the committee in May around Light Rail Stage 4, an update for the committee on the progress being made between the joint sort of city and state team. This is really seeking to build upon that, but also to give the committee an update on the linked project that Annette, the project manager from Transport and Traffic, Annette Morse, has been working on with our transport planners, which is the Palm Beach local area transport study. So we'll give it a bit of an update on that, and you can see that the linkages between the two pieces of work. In terms of the first part of the presentation, the Light Rail 4 update, great progress being made by Dale, who's sitting behind you, and the project team from the city, working side by side with the department. Naturally, we are a legitimate partner in this phase, very early phase of the planning. We are taking a whole lot of learnings from recent stages, including the very recent stage 3, around making sure that we as a city are ready, and we're doing what we can at this earliest possible phase to make sure that if the project is supported by the state and federal governments, that we have a corridor that is ready to accommodate a mass transit system down the Gold Coast Highway. It's really two phases that we're active in at the moment. The first phase is part of the project appraisal framework, the state government framework that really we do need to respect in terms of making sure that the state is able to tick the boxes from their investment entities and as well as the federal government. Its first stage is what's called a strategic assessment, and that was produced finalised late last financial year. It's going through the department's what's called the Infrastructure Investment Committee right now to get the support it needs to then move into what's called the options analysis phase. That was previously called the preliminary business case phase. The city team working side by side with the state team has already started working on that options analysis piece of work, making sure that we can seek to deliver the artefact that is the options analysis sort of mid to late in 2022, with the aim being that we'd get it to the department by the end of this financial year, for it then to move through an approval process within the state government in the second half of next calendar year. We are doing a fair bit of work, both transport planning, land use planning, economic analysis and whatnot, to make sure that, again, the local perspective, what a city shaping mass transit system can do for the southern part of the Gold Coast, connecting with the central part of the coast and to the north, making sure that we are well educated and informed about some of the local area transport and land use opportunities and risks, and making sure that we inject those into that process. And certainly the Palm Beach local area transport planning study is very much a wonderful bit of evidence of that as well. I think most on the committee will be aware that the department has led and is currently leading some what they call multi-modal corridor studies for that stage 4 corridor. Burleigh Heads to Tugun piece of work was completed a couple of years ago, or a year or two ago, and that's what they've recently undertaken some community consultation on, which I'll get onto in a second. And the second piece of work there, the southern part of that corridor, Tugun to Coolangatta, is underway now. The department's making pretty good progress with that. Our local area study is going to inject into that process as well, and the idea is that that's completed in line with that options analysis phase as well. Excuse me, in terms of the respective timings there, and I've touched on most of those elements, and you can see there that we are working on all fronts to make sure that we can get to, ideally, to a reference design, what's called the detailed business case, which is the third of the 3 business case phases with the state and with the input of expertise and hopefully resources from the federal government as well, into 2023, with a view that then the reference design and detailed business case phase, there's a few good years put into that piece of work, as we know from previous stages on the project too. But like I said, making good progress on all of the fronts that are identified there, and making sure that we've got a legitimate seat at the table through our governance, both informal and formal, with the state government. I just alluded to before, and most of you will be aware as well, there was a 3-month phase of community consultation about the Burleigh Heads to Tugun multimodal corridor study just recently completed. There was in total, I think they lost about a week because of a COVID lockdown, emergency COVID lockdown, but they did still host 43 consultation sessions. City officers attended a handful of those sessions as well to participate in responding to questions about local land use opportunities and constraints, local area transport elements as well, but certainly it was a departmental-led exercise to which we were aware of the methodology and some of the material that was being put into the public realm. The fly-through, I know, has spurred a bit of interest from community members, and rightly so. I think that the numbers, we had a project control group last week, I think they cited there was over 4,000 interactions with members of the community, over 500 submissions received. And the department is now also about to launch into a broader piece of engagement via phone surveys with businesses and residents along the entirety of the light rail corridor up to Helensvale as well. It's a good, I think it's a really good piece of work there. It's something that we certainly asked via Mr. Mayor, asked for a number of months ago, that for this light rail 4 piece of engagement, it really is a city shaping piece of infrastructure. It shouldn't just be confined to the Burleigh Heads to Tugun corridor. I do want to acknowledge, thank you to Councillors McDonald and O'Neill for sending through a whole lot of community representation from your offices to our project team as well. It's great that we've got full visibility of those. Sometimes, we can get a little bit of a sanitised version from those leading the community consultation exercise, but it's great to have the raw submissions, if you like, as well. It really does help our local area transport planning process. Back in May, the committee made a number of notes via resolution around making sure that we were advocating for some local benefits, if you like, from light rail stage 4. There's half a dozen there or so, and I'll let you just scan your eyes over each of those. Station design, SIPTED principles, which we know is very important, the interface with natural areas, the local street amenity and the complementary active transport infrastructure. Certainly parts 4 and 5 we'll talk a little bit more through the Palm Beach local area transport study, and also the connection through the Coolangatta CBD. So all of those elements have been taken on board progressively. Some of them, I'll say politely, are a little bit ahead of their time in terms of the detail through the planning and design process, but certainly it's a fantastic move by the committee to put these on the table formally and early, so that the department needs to make sure that they respect those positions from the city as they move forward through the planning and design process.
No, wait till the end. Yep.
Keep going. Thank you, Madam Chair. One of the pieces of information, if you like, that was put into the public realm through the multimodal corridor study for Burleigh to Tugun was, again, very high-level concepts about what the Gold Coast Highway, what the functional form of that Gold Coast Highway corridor might look like moving forward. Again, very early days in a concept planning process. The colour coding there does oscillate between a 4-lane through carriageway in the red colour, I'll say, and a 2-lane through carriageway in the yellow colour. It's probably one of the most commented upon elements of what has been submitted or has been circulated by the department as recently as last week, again through the same project control group. It's fair to say that the department is open-minded about the ways in which the community has responded to this piece of information. The fly-through that you may have seen also does show an oscillation between 2 through lanes, 4 through lanes, parking in some areas around stations, parking not in some areas on the Gold Coast Highway. The detail through the planning process will come in time. It's certainly noticeable that the community and stakeholders within the local community have made it pretty clear that where possible, we should try to maintain as much carrying capacity for the Gold Coast Highway through Palm Beach and as much corridor on-street parking as possible as well. It's not just advocacy on behalf of our local representatives, but also some community members as well. That's now part of the next phase of this planning process, whereby the department does take on board that community feedback. And certainly Mr Mayor took the time to offer a formal city position, I think it was in late August, around those exact 2 points as well, making sure that where possible we maintain as much carrying capacity on the Gold Coast Highway, and where possible we retain as much on-street parking in this part of the Gold Coast as well. Another element in here, which we're talking on an ongoing basis with the likes of Councillor McDonald and some community members, was around retaining, where possible, as many of the right-hand turning movements from the highway and onto the highway. Certainly some of the fly-through, the departmental fly-through did show the removal of some of those, and again, that's been commented upon by many of the community members, including some of the businesses and community facilities that are dotted along the corridor as well. So again, feedback that's not been unheard, if you like, by the department. The final slide, just in relation to, as I segue into talking about the Palm Beach Local Area Transport Planning Study, is about the M1. Now, just as a placeholder reminder that there's a significant investment from the state government down the road, just further to the west, whereby the Varsity Lakes to Tugun section of the M1 upgrade, 6 lanes minimum, plus service roads, plus active transport connections and corridors. Significantly enhanced interchange capacities at exits 87, 89 and 92. This is, and certainly from the work that we've analysed, the detailed modelling we've done for the Palm Beach Local Area Study, this does take a lot of the traffic growth, and that's from that southern part of the Gold Coast and further south, away from, if you like, that coast, the reliance on the coastal corridor, where we are looking for something a little bit more progressive in terms of a contemporary transport system, in terms of a mass transit system for the coastal corridor. So the first slide of a handful on the Palm Beach Local Area Transport Study, the third dot point there I think is pretty important, and you can see there the functional hierarchy of the road network there. I think you're all familiar with the motorway, arterial, subarterial, distributor, collector and local street nomenclature we have. One is about moving lots of vehicles, one is more about a place and a local street access function. The third dot point there, I don't choose my words loosely there, really what Annette and the team have done through the Palm Beach Local Area Transport Study is use what I call inherited network assumptions from the department in relation to the M1 piece of work, in relation to the multimodal corridor studies that are being undertaken at the moment. We are a partner in those, in the broader Light Rail 4 process. We are a stakeholder in the M1 works and in the multimodal corridor piece of work as well. So we inherit these assumptions. What we then do is work on a whole lot of modelling and network scenarios to come up with what we think is a logical future state scenario for the Palm Beach Local Area Transport Study that aligns itself with our transport strategy and our associated modal plans. And it doesn't necessarily mean that we inherit network risks or network characteristics that aren't commensurate with the local area context of Palm Beach. So that's an important comment, and that's really been one of the non-negotiable principles that I set the team a number of months ago as they worked through the transport planning exercise. Another important point here is, and hopefully you can follow the diagram, really what we're dealing with at the moment in terms of that major north-south capacity through Palm Beach is really we've got essentially 4 lanes on the M1 and 4 lanes on the Gold Coast Highway. Not a great deal of modal choice and 8 traffic lanes. The middle diagram there, the short to medium term I'll call this, is really what we're looking at in terms of our planning scenario, the assumptions about that north-south network. We'll have veloways associated with the M1 upgrade. We'll have enhanced service roads. We'll have a widened M1. We'll have, at the moment, the inherited assumption is that we'll have an oscillation between 2 and 4 lanes on the Gold Coast Highway. All going well, we will have a light rail system, and all going well, we will have an oceanway as well. So what you can see there is a much more, a much broader modal choice and also much greater capacity for north-south movement, and a combination of inter-regional movement and local movement as well. In future, medium to long term, and don't quote me on, I won't quote me on the years here, but the state government are also working on the heavy rail extension from Varsity to the airport as well. So this is a piece of work. Again, we're more of a stakeholder, if you like, on that piece of work. Dale represents us on the project control group there as well, to make sure that, again, when we start building this multimodal north-south corridor, that the city has a seat at the table in terms of being able to influence in a positive way what the outcomes are for the city from a local perspective. So it's important to note this, and certainly in terms of some of the numbers that no doubt I'll get asked about, and the network characteristics and network assumptions, these paint a pretty positive story in terms of the investment in that north-south part of the coast, whereby we do know that there is a convergence, if you like, of the M1 and the Gold Coast Highway and the associated local streets in terms of geography. So historically, there has been more of a blend of using the highway and the motorway for those through trips. Really, the strategic investment in the western option, the M1 option and the service road option will mean, and of the myriad of transport modelling analyses that we've run, all signs point to the through traffic function migrating across to the western option, which is the M1. Much higher capacity, much more reliable, and that's, again, an inherited assumption. It's a positive one for suburban Palm Beach and one that is consistent amongst all of the modelling runs that we've done. Hopefully the slide sort of further verifies what I've just mentioned. It's important to note here, and I'll choose my words carefully here to make sure that there's a complete understanding. This is the numbers on the right of the screen here are about through movements. Vehicle trips that don't have an origin or a destination between Tallabudgera Creek and Currumbin Creek. So what I'm showing you there, that the through traffic function between 2021 and 41, the through traffic function is going to increase by circa 80%. In that time, through traffic function. But the through traffic function, the non-local traffic along the Gold Coast Highway, is going to halve. That doesn't mean traffic volumes will halve. It will means that the through traffic function will halve because of the significantly enhanced capacity north-south on the M1 and the associated service roads. It's a really important point that what it does mean is that there is a slower growth of traffic on the Gold Coast Highway. And in some modelling scenarios, because of changes to function and form of that highway, there is actually a reduction in vehicle volumes along there because of the people movement concept of what a mass transit system can provide, a light rail system can provide. So people throughput will increase, vehicle throughput, particularly that of non-local trips, will decrease. That's what every single of the 23 modelling runs we've done for this piece of work shows us. Where we go with that now, what we do is work on a very sound principle-based approach to look at our future road network and functional hierarchy to a point where we need to target our investment to accommodate the moderate growth and the natural growth, the organic growth in movement around the suburb and through the suburb, again, to try and ensure that, try to facilitate and enable the road network to perform as we would like it to perform. We want the M1 doing the heavy lifting. We don't want local streets doing the heavy lifting. What we have shown, and again through multiple modelling runs, is that some of the local streets, and we can hone in on a couple of them, there's Mallowa, there's Townsend, there's Palm Beach Ave, there's 19th Ave. These are all operating in all of our modelling runs well under 4-lane capacity. And Palm Beach, the western part of Palm Beach is obviously the exception there where it already is 4 lanes, but certainly none of the modelling runs we've done, of which Annette's tested a whole lot of different sensitivities on these, show that we are anywhere near 4-lane roads for any of these local streets. And what you'll see in a couple of future slides, and what you may have read in the report, is that absolutely there will need to be a program of works to accommodate for the organic growth in Palm Beach over the next number of decades. But they are likely to be, and they do need to be proven up through individual project cases and through our planning and design process, but they will be focusing in on things like localised intersection upgrades, localised safety improvements where we've got a part of the road network which may have been through its operational life, priority intersections that we might need to introduce some sort of additional normal traffic regulation to make sure safety is paramount through this. So we do know there as well, and we are assuming, and you may recall the previous slide, the Gold Coast Highway was an arterial road. We're not looking at, we want that to be a sub-arterial at most in 2041. It's a people-moving corridor, and we're going to design it and plan it accordingly. The concepts that we are looking to progress, now you're going to use my terms carefully, these are concepts based on a fairly high-level strategic area-wide transport study. These are very sound concepts that Annette and the team has looked at. Now, I think this one's Townsend Avenues, the example on the right. Pardon me if you can't see the detail, but what we're looking at is very similar to what we've done in other parts of the local road network, where we have, for example, a 4-way priority intersection, we tidy that up a little bit. We make that safe. We make people realise exactly who's got right of way there. We make sure that people can cross the road in those locations. We make sure where we've got, say for example, where we've got small roundabouts that we put in splitter islands to make sure people can cross the road there. We basically give it a 2021 to 2041 lick of paint to make sure that this operates in a way that can accommodate a bit of organic growth. But we're not, none of these concepts you'll see are 4-laning Mallowa Drive, are 4-laning Townsend Ave. We are miles off having to do that based on the myriad of analysis that we've done here. So they are corridor safety improvements like we've done throughout other parts of the city that represent a good value for money investment for the city to complement the major investment that the state are doing to the west, and hopefully that partners will be delivering on the highway in years to come. We already have a number of intersections in our program as well. It's important to note through our 4-year program. Some of these we are delivering as a city, the whole city fund. Some of them may be candidates for trunk infrastructure funding. Some of them are likely to be grant funded with the department. We're working on a black spot project at the moment. I think it's Thrower and Losing Parade, I think it is, whereby we actively seek, as you know, and as you won't provide us wonderful support, we actively advocate for these additional funding sources from the state or federal government. We'll keep doing that. We've got projects in our pipeline at the moment. What will come, as has happened with other area studies that we've done, which have been discussed in this forum in months gone by, this should and will precipitate a program of works for Palm Beach through projects that we'll take through our usual gateway process to make sure that they do represent value for money investments by the city, and that they do complement the work being done by other entities. And they do absolutely sing to our transport strategy and our associated modal plans. Like I said, we'll progress these, and there are some images here. You can see there's an embryonic program of works, if you like, within Palm Beach there that we think, okay, within this next 20-year window, 2021 to 2041, we have a series of interventions that we'd like to introduce. Some of them, like I said, are conversion of priority or roundabout intersections to signals. Some of them are corridor improvements, like I mentioned on the other slide, around just making things safer, creating some short auxiliary lanes so that vehicles, if they stop and prop to turn right, they don't block the whole road. These kind of things. Localised improvements for localised streets. We will do, and I know we've been asked, well, are we going to do some community consultation on this piece of work? Area studies, because they are A, strategic, and B, fairly high-level concepts by the nature of them, we tend to do our community consultation via your good selves as local elected representatives. As we progress concepts where they become a little bit more tangible in terms of them being project candidates, it might be improvements around a school. As you know, we always go and speak to the school entity. We speak to the principal before we push it through what we call our Gate Zero. So we will progressively do some community consultation more broadly than just in this instance, via Councillor McDonald's office. And the final slide, I believe, Madam Chair, is that we note the contents of the report, and I thank you for your attention.
Great, thanks, Matt. Great presentation. So there's a few questions that came up during that, so I'll go to Councillor Vorster first, then Councillor Tozer, Councillor Patterson and Councillor McDonald. And over to you, Councillor Vorster.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I just had some questions on the back of commentary in the press, I think most recently by the Transport Minister, and just wondered whether there was any material risk to the project because of any native title claims that may be unfolding. And if you can't talk specifically about any claims which may affect the headland, I'd be interested to know whether there was any early feedback or guidance from the Indigenous community around the Bora Ring that's along the corridor, because I note that's now presently protected by some fencing, and there's some sort of notification signs that have been placed up around that particular heritage asset. I can't recall any media commentary around roadworks and their impact on that site. Were there any, and do we contemplate any risk as we march towards the headland?
Through Madam Chair, thank you, Councillor Vorster. It's fair to say I'm aware of the most recent media reports. All I could probably offer at this point in time is that the departmental statements are quite accurate in terms of they do take native title and cultural heritage issues very, very seriously. It's part of their due diligence as part of a planning process. From memory, back in stage 3 early days, there was a little bit of commentary, I think, about the Bora Ring, and I know that the department and the delivery partners did take a number of steps to make sure that there was a respectful way in which there was a co-location of a project advancing through a design and planning and design phase, and the requirements of that very important stakeholder group.
So, Madam Chair, through you, perhaps to the Director or again to Matt, who would principally be the lead agency or level of government that will have the conversation with the Indigenous community around their cultural value and connection to country?
State government.
So if we do receive inquiries from interested parties on this topic. Would city officers be able to provide us with a contact in the department that we can make a connection to, so that those representations are properly recorded and dealt with by the state government?
Through you, Madam Chair, we'll send out that advice to all of the councillors. We'll give you the project contact details at Transport and Main Roads.
And Madam Chair, just finally, I was very interested to hear of the Veloway that's proposed for the Tugun, or the Varsity Lakes to Tugun kind of M1 expansion. I actually didn't realise that was part of the original scope of works with that expansion. Do we have an idea of where or the, I suppose, the length of that Veloway is? You know, where's the start of that particular length, and where is the proposed end?
Through you, Madam Chair, look, it's very concept design at the moment, so it's very, very broad. We have an idea that, the idea is it's going to link the entire project, but there's no specific details on exactly how or where.
So would this potentially, sorry, Madam Chair, just particularly interested in, I'm often told to get on my bike. Is it proposed that, or envisaged that the Veloway would sit on the western or eastern side?
Through you, Madam Chair, we have no information on that at the moment. So it's, again, that's a matter of design detail, which, hasn't been apparent to us.
And Madam Chair, the only reason why I ask is, particularly in the part of the Gold Coast that I represent that interfaces with the M1, the east-west movement across the M1 by active transport is actually quite difficult. And it seems as though when you drive towards Brisbane, there are forever these pedestrian bridges that effectively create an active transport corridor across the M1 away from busy on-ramps, off-ramps and roundabouts. And I generally feel that that's quite lacking, particularly in the central southern end of the Gold Coast. You don't see many opportunities for people to get to, say, schools that might sit on the west or schools that might sit on the east outside of those very complicated interchanges. And the reason why I ask about the Veloways is they may be a very good active transport option to link more people to those school communities. But I think we risk supporting an investment where there's no easy and effective way for people to commence those journeys if we don't have the east-west pedestrian piece sorted out. So if there is some further information about the Veloway, I'd be really interested in how we can incorporate that Veloway into our active transport corridors and make sure that there are protected pedestrian crossings and shared paths, I should say, that allow people to get onto that network.
Through you, Madam Chair, look, I need to clarify, Councillor Vorster, sorry, I misunderstood the question to a degree. We do understand that on the western side of the M1 is the location of the Veloway for that project, so for the Varsity to Tugun upgrade. And we have been working with Transport and Main Roads over the last few years to look at exactly what you've asked us to look at, which is those connections through to local schools and local destinations. It's still a work in progress, trying to get some of those connections made. We've been quite successful in lobbying the state government to provide that particular facility to try and access as many schools and shopping centres on the western side as the M1 as we can. Pardon me. Now, your point about crossing the M1 is a very good one, and it's a problem across the entire M1, and we certainly notice that in the north of the city where, the horse is bolted. So our advice to the department has been to look at every single opportunity for those east-west connections that they are able to do with this Varsity to Tugun upgrade project.
Great. So would you expect that the state government's in any way planning potential future pedestrian overpasses into their design work, or is it something that they will revisit when it may be a priority for them? Because I know, for example, Councillor Tozer and I talk about this all the time, that our respective communities would benefit from, a safe kind of overpass linking our schools and residential areas. I just figured it'd be cheaper getting that, at least the footings in the ground now, than attempting to retrofit it after the fact.
Through Madam Chair, at the moment, I understand with the interchange upgrades, Councillor, they do build in a safe and direct active transport facility as part. I don't believe that the M1 Varsity to Tugun has a separated, geographically separated active transport overpass, but like I said, exits 87, 89, 92, as they are doing with the planning through things like the Coomera Connector and whatnot, they are building in something that at least provides a connected active transport bracket cycling facility across at those interchange upgrades, but not separate at the moment, it's my understanding. It doesn't mean we can't investigate it further with the department, and certainly investments of that scale would be very logical candidates for state government grant funding and road safety grant funding and the like, so it certainly wouldn't write it off, but I don't believe it's part of the current Varsity Lakes to Tugun scheme being delivered at the moment.
Thanks, Councillor Vorster. I go to Councillor Tozer.
Thank you. So, first question, just kind of following on from Councillor Vorster's, this big double diamond interchange, does it have pedestrian or bikeway options on it?
Through you, Madam Chair, that's my understanding. You have to, the detail I might get back to you. We can provide, there's a lot of detail available in the public realm at the moment about the Varsity Lakes to Tugun project because it is essentially being delivered right now. So certainly I can certainly circulate the
I'm not in a rush.
The information.
I mean, particularly
there's a fly through as well that shows.
I mean, the conversation that Councillor Vorster has started in relation to bikeways in that southern precinct is interesting to me because there's obviously an opportunity to connect Division 9 and Mudgeeraba and some of those Robina connections where the stadium is to those more southernmost bikeways. So I'm fascinated by that. My question actually related to one of the images in your presentation. Is it possible to go back in the presentation back to the slide where there was two photographs and it looked like one of the two depictions, that's it there. Is that the Burleigh, on the bottom there, bottom right, is that the Burleigh connection with the wildlife bridge that goes over the Burleigh Heads Park? Am I looking at the right space there?
It is.
And is that is that definitely going to happen, or is that just like a depiction? The idea of a wildlife overpass between the reserves.
Through Madam Chair, at the moment it's a depiction, but it's definitely in the mix as the project progresses. Not just a figment of someone's imagination. It's something that's been actively worked upon by the delivery partners for Stage 4.
And is it connecting? So on the left hand side of that picture is Burleigh Heads National Park. Is that right?
That's my understanding. Yeah.
And then on the right hand side of the picture, is that a council reserve? So is it ours or is it still Burleigh Heads National Park?
So it's still going through Burleigh Ridge. Yeah.
So Burleigh Ridge remains. I suppose the question I've got is that there's a vegetated asset that is effectively a bridge, but I thought might be connecting a council reserve to a national park, and I wondered what that would mean for us if our natural area, how will the natural area be managed in the context of where the national park finishes and ends? And I appreciate that might not be a transport thing, but effectively it's a transport asset.
I'll take that one. I guess we have, we draw a parallel with similar situations in Brisbane, in Kurrawa Forest Park. Council developed a land bridge several years ago, which separates different natural areas, and I believe there's different tenure. So, and there'd be other locations in a similar context. So, I don't believe the tenure arrangements would be too much of a problem from a management point of view, but it's something we would need to work through with the relevant agencies.
Yeah, okay, cool.
In the work we've done with the department so far, albeit it is EPE, one of the lead stakeholders from the city's point of view, the tenure arrangements has not come up as a significant risk or a significant issue to be addressed as we progress.
Yeah, to what extent do you think it's likely that wildlife bridge will be delivered?
Look, it's difficult for us to say, Councillor, but as Matt said earlier, this is something which has been taken very seriously by the state. It's taken very seriously by us as well, and it's, as I alluded to earlier, it's not the first time that wildlife crossings across major transport corridors have been contemplated. We have seen from the examples which I cited earlier that they're very effective. And it's, from what I understand, it's had some very positive feedback through the consultation process.
So, Yeah, so last follow-up question. I kayak through the back of Koala Park regularly under the bridge that's just south of there. Is it expected that all of the pedestrian connections and walking connections through there will be retained, connecting what is the southern side of Burleigh Heads National Park and I think it's called, what's the little beach in there? Echo Beach or something?
Okay.
Yeah, across to Koala Park. Will that all still be connected?
Through you, Madam Chair, my understanding is that the policy position, if you like, of the department translated through the projects is that it at least needs to be retained, if not enhanced significantly through a project of this scale. So connectivity, local connectivity for people is a really, really important characteristic of this project. So in answer to your question generically, it will be at least maintained, if not significantly enhanced.
Yeah, so final question is on the southern side of that bridge is one of our tourist park assets. Is there any requirement for us to dedicate land or in relation to that tourist park?
Through Madam Chair, not to my understanding, Councillor Tozer. I understand that we're planning principle, if you like, through that multimodal corridor study was that the department were going to absolutely try to minimise any property resumption through that piece of work. They were working within quite a constrained cross-section.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Tozer. I'll go to you, Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. On this same slide, when we raised, first of all, that concern about business-friendly designs in May or March, whenever it was, the point was that there was an issue with the existing station designs and that we've identified issues, particularly with the Southport one and with Surfers Paradise one, that isn't business friendly. So the response that you've got there from TMR that will be consistent with what we do already doesn't kind of get to the point. I appreciate that you say that you're going to continue to advocate on that. Can you just give me a bit more colour to that?
Well, the colour's orange, isn't it? So that's partially part of the problem, I think. Sorry to cut you off there, Matt. It was too good to go past. Look, it is disappointing, I guess, the initial response, but it's not unexpected, and the process of negotiation does take a few goes. So we're in dialogue you might recall that the discussion at the time, we talked about the Melbourne example, how they're quite slimmed down and they're very effective. So we continue to put that before the department to say you can have a reduced station design, which is still very effective and is, to your point, Councillor, better situated to the immediacy of the surroundings, particularly with that integration with the community. We're very aware of the issues with some of the existing stations, and it's often been put before this committee and council, the issues, for example, at Surfers Paradise as well, that it actually sort of blocks off that interaction between the station precinct and the businesses. So we're really keen to progress this again with the department and to get them to consider more fully what we're really trying to propose here. And I don't think the horse is entirely bolted. It's just one of those iterative conversations that we need to go through.
Through you, Madam Chair, to follow up, do you think it would be useful for advocacy to be coming from different channels? So from a political level to the Minister, and also interested commercial operations that consult on this that might be keen to put their position forward. I know there's some that have been done a lot of work on the CBD, so they really understand the shortfalls and they could probably present as well.
Through you, Madam Chair, Councillor Patterson, that's a good idea. My experience with the department is that they listen to well-crafted advice. So if that advice is able to be based on the experience and is constructive in that regard, they generally tend to listen to it.
Do you want to, through Madam Chair, just an additional point there to Alton's already mentioned, Councillor. Right now, this is it's early days to be trying to influence colour palettes and materials and whatnot. Right now in the planning process, we're trying to influence things like station footprint. So minimise the footprint. So that's the concept design phase we're up to, which was inferred in Mr Mayor's advocacy piece back at the end of August, was about trying to make the most of a narrower corridor. Downstream, when the likes of local businesses and local community members should be influencing the actual design of the known footprint. So there's a bit of a stage process, I think, with there. But right now we're trying to get them to slim down the overarching station design concept to allow for other things to still occur in the corridor as much as possible, rather than go with what they've done up the road, where they had a much wider corridor. So that's the phase we're up to at the moment in the planning process.
Through you, Madam Chair. And I think the other thing, well, certainly in the CBD that I'd be wanting to make sure is being communicated is just the transparency of the station. You know, if we'd still like to have that retrofitted, that station, so that you can see through it from the other side of it. It makes a lot of sense, and so we'd like them to consider that. I just got two other questions, Madam Chair. The first one is I just like to understand. I think coming in as a councillor when a lot on the light rail's done already, what is council's capacity to vote on anything now? Do we have any influential vote on any element of this, or is that already all ticked off? It's now with state government, and all we can do is effectively attempt to advocate.
Through you, Madam Chair, we are a funding partner, so we do have a voice, and we have been able to influence outcomes in the past, and examples of that would be around the Sundale Bridge active transport bridge, where we spent a lot of time lobbying for that particular facility and its final design. But there would be numerous ones on both a large scale and a lot of very small scale things which make a lot of difference to locals when they use the environment that this infrastructure is built in. So we do have a voice.
I can just follow up from that. So for example, with this consultation process that's just occurred, we're pretty far down the track before this consultation happens in terms of what is that the light rail is going there. It's just a matter of kind of tweaking it a bit. So is that consultation for the purpose of the state government? It's not up to us then to come back and say we think this or we think that on it, is it really? Is that right?
Through you, Madam Chair, that the consultation process was really to put before the community in that area what their concept design was and to seek that feedback. So, as Matt said, we were part of that process at several instances of there to be able to receive the feedback, particularly as it relates to issues of interest to local government. In the final mix, we, as I said before, we have some say over what can be done. But, it is a tripartite agreement between ourselves, the state government and the federal government. The state government lead the project. And I guess what ultimately falls out of that is still a matter to be decided, but largely driven by the lead of the state government.
Thanks, Councillor Patterson. Now go to Councillor McDonald and then Councillor O'Neill.
Thanks very much, Madam Chair. Firstly, I'd like to thank the officers because I know that they've put a lot of time and effort into this, and I think there's been a number of models done trying to look at the issues certainly between the two creeks, and Palm Beach is different to other areas on the Gold Coast, as we know, and certainly with the inherited assumptions by the state government that you've had to work within that vicinity. On the highway, because the state were looking at going from 4 to 2, it's created a number of issues which I have raised with the officers, and it was about the rat running in the residential streets, and because with the north south streets, you know, we've got Gold Coast Highway, we have Cypress Terrace, we have Townsend Avenue, Mallowar Drive, and of course the M1. The concern that has been with that reducing the 4 to 2 in places, that would be with the rat running down those residential streets. And as I'd said before, what I could see was it was going to make Palm Beach have 4 highways through Palm Beach. And certainly in the future, if it's looking at 4-laning, you know, Townsend Avenue or any of those residential streets, that will remove car parking along those streets and create further issues through Palm Beach. I know that in our meetings with TMR, I did raise the issue about the removal of car parking along the Gold Coast Highway, and their solution was to turn some of the adjoining streets to the highway into one way and have angle parking, which I felt would just absolutely destroy an area if we started doing that, although those internal streets are council streets. I noticed that on your presentation, in the book, in our agenda item, the internal streets are different to what it was on the presentation. Could you, you know, with the collector and distributor roads? So with what it's showing in the future road network, in that mauvey colour, it's all internal streets, north, south, collector, with 19th Avenue as a distributor and Palm Beach Avenue as a sub-arterial, with the, and I noticed that it's not the Gold Coast Highway, with that it's called the Ocean Boulevard. So could you just tell the difference between that one and one of the ones that were put up on the screen there, please?
Through Madam Chair, what's on the screen now is the same as what's on page 155 of the agenda.
Yeah, but you had some others.
I had, the only other one was this one, which is the current functional hierarchy.
No.
And then
no, on your presentation, you
Yep.
had some other road functions.
That's that one?
No, in your presentation in further. There.
So this is showing if you like, it's diagrammatically showing the spread of the potential interventions that we would introduce over the next 2021 to 2041 period. Yeah, so this isn't demonstrating a functional road hierarchy per se. This is showing where as you can see in the legend on the right-hand side of the screen, showing the different types of interventions that are being contemplated by the project team to then form part of our road and active transport infrastructure programs.
Okay, so are you telling me that with what's up on there showing the distributor roads like Townsend Avenue, section of Mallowar Drive, section of Tallabudgera Drive, that's not the case, and now that all those internal streets are actually collector?
So page 155 of the report, Councillor McDonald, is the proposed functional road hierarchy for Palm Beach as at October 2021.
Okay, thank you. Now, the other issue, and I know that we are addressing it with a further report, is Tabalban Street, because that is going to become an issue. With DTMR, you know, they realise that there's a lot of traffic going to go up through there and connect to West Burleigh Road. and I understand with the conversations that we've had with them, they're looking at all that traffic coming down and using 19th Avenue as a major thoroughfare between Gold Coast Highway and the M1. The other point that I'd like to raise too is they've been telling residents that from Cypress Terrace to the Gold Coast Highway and Palm Beach Avenue, that it's going to be closed off and made a pedestrian thoroughfare, and yet we've got it showing that it goes all the way through. And I just want to make sure that that's clarified with them. Is that going to be a through road to the Gold Coast Highway, or is it going to be closed at Palm Beach Cypress Terrace?
Through you, Madam Chair. Councillor McDonald, I know exactly what you're referring to, and all I can say is that what we are proposing for a Palm Beach local area transport study is what's shown on the screen there. So in answer to your question, no, we are not proposing, as an output of this local area transport study, a truncation of Palm Beach Avenue, be it temporary or permanent, at the eastern end on approach to the Gold Coast Highway. That was a concept or an idea that the department chose to include as part of their multimodal corridor study, without the blessing or involvement of the city in that concept.
Okay. Now, there was talk in here about the heavy rail. Have we got any dates on when they're looking at doing heavy rail down the M1?
Through you, Madam Chair, not explicitly, Councillor McDonald, at this point in time. They have commenced the business case process, a very similar process to what we're working on for Light Rail Stage 4. There is a milestone 11 years from now, which I think it would be natural to assume that they might be targeting for delivery prior to then, but again, very early days as part of the business case process to say which actual years they are looking to prepare for a construction phase. It's very early in the process to be talking about that.
Madam Chair, I'd just like to get some clarification on that, because I did ask the federal government in relation to the funding that they gave to the state government. I think there was about 8 or 9 million or something like that. And I understand the business case was only for up the northern end of the Gold Coast, and it wasn't in relation to the business case for the section between Varsity and Coolangatta. Would we be able to have that clarified, please?
Certainly through Madam Chair. So there are multiple exercises going on with regard to the heavy rail network upgrades, if you like, on the Gold Coast at the moment. Some of them emanating from the Cross River Rail project in Brisbane, which are sub-components for that much more regional project. There is a designated project underway for the heavy rail extension from Varsity to the airport, underway right now. Mr Jepson, sitting behind you, is our lead representative on that piece of governance, which is dedicated to that actual project in itself. So it's progressing through the early phases of a business case process in isolation, or as its own project, separate to those ones that are linked to Cross River Rail.
Okay. On page 153, and I know that we had discussion before, I had to really query that 1% through traffic for the next 20 years. I really have to question that. I know that your modelling has shown that, but I do have concerns. You know, with the amount of development that's happening, I do believe that figure is not correct.
With your blessing, and Councillor McDonald, I know there's a briefing arranged with you, I think next week, with Annette and a couple of the project team members. I'll ask them politely, perhaps talk you through what the devil in the detail, so to speak, with regard to that particular figure. I know it's an area we spoke about before. We've probably done 3 or 4-fold times the amount of analysis on this study than what we would usually do as part of an area transport study, because of the permutations of the network characteristics, shall we say, to a point where they've used multiple modelling platforms. They've used a very, can I say, Annette, very well-regarded consultancy who's done a lot of work locally in this space as well. We're pretty confident in the due diligence that we've done and the the outputs and the outcomes of the piece of work that's been done thus far to a point where I'd like to be able to have the team speak with you through that process and through the outputs and the outcomes thus far to give you a high degree of confidence in the detail that we've presented today.
Thank you. I'm sorry, Madam Chair, there is a few other things. Now, I did raise about the right-hand turns because at the present, and I went through the flyover, and by the way, the flyover is different to the hard copy that the state government had put out. And residents were asked to make comment on the information that was put out by the state, and it's very difficult when it differs between the flyover and the hard copies. Now, with the right-hand turns, what I could see, there is only heading north, there is only one right-hand turn at Thrower Drive. The next right-hand turn is next to the Talbudgera Creek into the Rec Centre car park. So that was the only right-hand turns off the Gold Coast Highway towards the ocean. So anyone that needed to get onto the other side of the road had to come off, go down a back street and go back. The issues, and starting from Talbudgera Creek, just to let the councillors know, at present, if you're heading south, you come across the Talbudgera Creek Bridge, you can turn into the Talbudgera Tourist Park. They have removed that crossing there, you can't get in, so it means that you'll have to either drive down Talbudgera Drive and get into the Talbudgera Tourist Park from a little very narrow street, or go down Townsend Avenue, or go down the highway, turn at 19th Avenue, come back down Townsend Avenue to get into the tourist park. So that is certainly an issue there. I was advised the other day that the Rec Centre, as you probably are aware, they have expanded that considerably in the last number of months. With the car park out the front there has been a reduction of the car park, and I understand that to take up that reduction, they've now, where the big white house is over the other side of the creek, that's why they've included that car park to make up for the reduction of the car park near the rec centre. I understand with the rec centre, you'll be going in there, but you'll be coming out near the Talbudgera Surf Club. So at that intersection of Talbudgera Drive and Gold Coast Highway, it's going to be a massive use of that intersection when you've got over 100 car parks that are in the rec centre, plus all their activities, you know, throughout the day. Now, we're coming through a car park there that have people with dogs, you've got people going into the club, you've got children, so it's creating a very dangerous situation.
Councillor McDonald, can I just ask you there if a lot of your questions are actually departing from that, we're just noting this today, did you want to do those offline with the officers?
I know, I think that needs to be raised here so the other councillors know what the issues are. The other
Well, actually, I'll give you a couple more minutes there and then I'll go to Councillor O'Neill, if that's all right. Thank you.
Thank you. The other issues with the Ocean Way, and I'm just wondering if you've had any discussion in regards to the Ocean Way on how they're actually going to proceed with it.
Through you, Madam Chair. Again, I'm sorry to sound like a broken record here, Councillor. It's very early days. The department's doing their own early concept planning around the off-corridor cycle facility. We will be engaged with as a key stakeholder at a certain point in time through the planning process, but at the moment it's departmentally led and one that we are going to be informed of at a time, hopefully not too distant future.
Thank you. Just one more. Councillors, I would like you to certainly have a look at all the intersections where the intersections, where you can turn right into those intersections, and how far people have to go down, turn around into a residential street to come back to get onto the eastern side of the highway. So I'd like you all to really have a look at all those intersections and how it's going to impact on the internal streets. It's not only on the western side of the Gold Coast Highway, it's certainly on the eastern side of the Gold Coast Highway, where you have a one-lane Jefferson Lane going one way. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thanks, Councillor McDonald. Councillor O'Neill.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Look, I do appreciate Councillor McDonald going into that detail, because it's a corridor study that's in Division 13 and limited to Division 14 down to Tugun. So I understand what she's saying, because I've had a really good look at it as well. And I think we are trusting that that you guys will actually take all this feedback into your talks with DTMR, because they certainly, in some areas, they have actually just glossed over a lot of things. And the local road network, which you guys are looking at for the Palm Beach area, and I'm hoping that you'll be looking at in my area as well. Not a lot has been brought up about between Currumbin and Tugun, but there is a lot there, and it will go down to one lane. So the local road network around that, being up to Mangan, being Pacific Parade at Currumbin, there'll have to be some solutions there. My big concern, and the concern that's being brought up to my office after the consultation, was the actual alignment of Light Rail Stage 4 going through Tugun. Everyone expected it to be down the middle of the Gold Coast Highway, because it's so wide once you get past Trelona Street there. They've actually pushed it to the Golden Ford Drive side. So, of course, everyone is concerned about maybe loss of vegetation, because there's tremendous vegetation all along there to buffer the Gold Coast Highway from Golden Ford Drive and the residents who live along there. So that is a real concern. Do you know if that is set in stone? If the feedback, if they get tremendous feedback, and I know there has, about the alignment, is there any chance that they would look at realignment?
Through you, Madam Chair. It is just a concept design at the moment, and particularly in the southern part of that study area, it's something that they've done to get the paper dirty, so to speak. So it's an initial go, and there is plenty of opportunity for further consultation. Now, I can't make promises on obviously on behalf of the department in terms of how they might treat the feedback, but the opportunity exists nevertheless to provide that detailed feedback from the community around concerns that they might have.
Thank you. They have advised, I mean, I brought up the same questions that a lot of my residents did at the consultation. They did advise that they will be widening the other side of the road, but it is a, just, and they haven't done any planning past Boyd Street and Tugun. But I think I've brought up with you guys, and I know a lot of my residents have brought up closure of some streets, how that's going to work, and certainly with Stewart's Road, which is an 80k road, which is a bypass, the highway, the M1 bypass there, providing an ingress and egress off that road, I think is crazy, and where they want to do it. But a lot of that feedback, I thought they listened at the consultation, but I'm expecting that you guys will come to me, especially about local road network, even though it's only from Currumbin to Tugun at this stage. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor O'Neill. I go to Councillor Gates.
Thanks, Chair. Through you to the officers, even though this simply notes the report, is there perhaps an opportunity for the officers before full council to work with both Councillor McDonald and Councillor O'Neill to identify the valid points that have been raised, so that at this very early stage we can document some of the problems that, as experienced divisional councillors, they've identified, and take them back to the department so that they are documented at this time when there is an opportunity to perhaps influence the outcome?
Through you, Madam Chair, yes, there is. If you'd like to draw out some specifics, so there are, and we've done that before, and we cited the example earlier today of the specific advice that we gave the department, say around station design. So if there are particular elements here, or you'd like to reinforce that the local road network is a responsibility of the city, and we have a plan for that moving ahead, yes, happy to consider that.
Well, I'm not as familiar, obviously, with the Southern Gold Coast as Councillors McDonald and O'Neill, but perhaps they can work together to have some succinct messaging prepared for full council so that we can identify the major issues of concern so that they're carried forward.
Thanks, Councillor Gates. And I'll go to Councillor Owen-Jones.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you, two questions. The first one was just in regards to page 153, where it talked of the through traffic dropping by 46%. What is the actual volume of traffic predicted at that same time, though? So I appreciate that through traffic's going to halve, but what will actually happen with volume?
Through Madam Chair, we're working on around about 20,000 vehicles per day at the crossing of Tally Creek there, based on the strategic transport model.
In 2041?
2041.
Okay, and what is it? What would it be at the moment?
It's around 30,000 vehicles per day.
Okay, thank you. And in regards to, I think it was point 6 of the list that we'd provided at the previous committee meeting, which was the down to Coolangatta. That's being identified as a multi-modal corridor study. I read that in part to be something that may very well become out of scope. What do you think the chances of it are of being not taken down to Coolangatta? Like, I mean, I think that it was clear from the councillor's position last time that the city thought that it was actually pretty important to link Coolangatta, but do you think that it's something that may just get value engineered out?
Through you, Madam Chair, I don't believe so. All the discussions that we've had have really, the department has really recognised the importance of Coolangatta, and this is also borne by the interest from Transport for New South Wales with their study from Tweed South through to Coolangatta. So there's a really good opportunity to make that linkage, and I've had no sense of the department not considering that linkage. But as Councillor O'Neill said earlier, the current concept planning has gone down to around about Boyd Street, Chugan. So we're yet to see the bit from Boyd Street further south, but I would be very surprised indeed if there was no consideration given to that connection.
Through Madam Chair, just to add to that, thanks, Elton. Councillor Owen-Jones, 100%, it's still on the table. The local area transport piece of work we're doing at Coolangatta with the department is working on that basis as well. It is a fundamental part of stage 4, and that we are also, as Elton alluded to, looking further south as for a further extension.
Yeah, look, I mean, I suppose my view is that it's actually critical that we don't fall short those last 3 or 4 kilometres or whatever it might be, because I think it then becomes the golden thread that links all of the city from Coolangatta all the way up to Helensvale and beyond through the shift in transport. And it would be, I think, disappointing if we got to the airport and it was like, oh, well, that's where we're at, and come back and talk to us about stage 5 in another 20 years. But I just think that we need to emphasise it because I think it activates Coolangatta, and I think it joins Coolangatta via the light rail up to those northern suburbs that it naturally connects with.
Chair. Councillor O'Neill.
Thanks, Chair. I've certainly talked to everybody that I could talk to Councillor about it, and getting the same answer that they are looking to take it to Coolangatta. The other positive thing, I think, is they're also talking to Tweed about taking the Tweed from Coolangatta. So that's another positive as well.
Thanks for that, Councillor O'Neill. Are we out of questions? All right. And on this particular one, we're just noting the report and then looking for Councillor O'Neill and Councillor McDonald to come back with some information for full council. Councillor Owen-Jones.
So I'm happy to move the fact that we're noting it, but I'm also happy to note the fact that, I can appreciate that the two divisional councillors may want to add to that at full council. So it may very well, I don't know what they're going to do today, but I think it makes sense that we just note it. But clearly listing some of those concerns between now and council is important.
Through you, Madam Chair, councillors, what we could do is once we've had the discussion with the councillors, we can submit some recommended words to beef up the final recommendation to be considered at council. If you're happy with that, we can circulate to you before council.
That'd be great. Thank you. Are you both happy with that? Yep. All right. So
it's very difficult. Sorry, Madam Chair. It's very difficult to get a definite idea of what they're doing along the Gold Coast Highway, simply because, like I mentioned to you before, their flyover is different to their hard copy. We don't know where you can do, the U-turns. So if we knew about what they were looking at with U-turns, that'd certainly be a lot better too.
And I think that comes with the detailed case study. That's why I think they changed the name to the options analysis. They're going to look at all of those options, bring them together and come back, which is what they did with stage 3. Yeah. They can't give us a finished project until they actually have some input. And I found it frustrating, Councillor McDonald, I agree with you, over the last 5 years, and still don't have a start date yet. So I know where you're coming from, but it's because it's such early stages. We did get certain wins during the small wins during the preliminary business case study way back in, I think, 2016, and it's worked its way through. Yeah.
Could I just ask a question? With the U-turns, are there U-turns elsewhere in the city where the light rail is, or have they cut all the U-turns out?
Through you, Madam Chair, yes, there are.
There are.
Thanks, Councillor McDonald.
That we don't encourage the state to introduce hook turns. Otherwise, I'll be just driving around a block.
At 10:34. Thanks very much for everyone's participation.